Listening Library presents A World Without Summer. A volcano erupts, a creature awakens, and the sun goes out. By Nicholas Day. Read for you by Louisa Zhu. It was a warning. The only way to understand is to have been there. The word loud isn't loud enough. The word hot isn't hot enough. None of the words are enough. The only way to understand is to have been there. But if you had been there, you would be dead. So we will do the best we can. This is a story about a volcano. It's about the legendary eruption that destroyed the volcano. Before the eruption, this volcano was beautiful, its slopes green, its valleys rich. The island it sat on hummed with life. After the eruption, it was a shattered wreck, a literal shell of itself. It was gray, lifeless, an apocalyptic landscape of ash and bone. And over the next few years, the fallout from that eruption would turn the whole world gray. The weather would go haywire. It would bring famine, disease, death. No one living through it knew what was happening or why. No one knew if life would ever be the same. It was a climate shock, a sudden, terrifying shift in the seasons. All over the world, people discovered that the things they'd taken for granted were no longer to be taken for granted. They'd lived by the grace of a habitable planet. They'd lived by the grace of a habitable climate. Suddenly, all that was gone. Then the skies shifted. The weather changed. The horrors vanished. It was all forgotten. The chaos, the uncertainty, the fear. The fact that we live by the grace of a habitable planet, a habitable climate, that was forgotten too. But it shouldn't have been. It was a warning. Part 1. Tectonic plates and molten rock, Komodo dragons, pearl diving and honey harvesting, slave traders, colonial outposts, mysterious cannons, fountains of flame, boiling seas, floating forests, rivers of fire. A day turns to night. A world turns inside out. A lost people. A veil of ash and acid. Fire and Fury. Mount Tambora, Indonesia, 1815. The gods would rise up. This is how it starts. Far beneath the Earth's surface, a tectonic plate slips. A tectonic plate is always slipping. That's what they do. Slip. The Earth is covered with these plates, and they slide around the crust, moving a tiny amount each year, a few inches at most. Each plate is in motion, and each grinds into the next, or pulls apart, or collides. Down below, the pressure is tremendous. The temperature is preposterous. There is so much pressure and so much heat that fluid is pushed out of solid rock. These fluids rise, and as they rise, they melt the rock above. This molten rock is called magma, and it is threaded with gas and thick with minerals and water vapor. It is buoyed by the gas, and therefore lighter than the rock around it. It rises. It moves toward the surface, weaving its way through cracks and fissures in the crust. It is still rising, melting more rock along the way, a balloon of melted rock and gas. And then, usually, it stops. It stays. It cools. But not always. Because sometimes it keeps moving, shifting, rising. Sometimes it finds a way out. On the morning of April 5th, 1815, the Benares sat in port in Makassar, in what today we call Indonesia. The Benares was a cruiser, a sailing ship from the East India Company, which effectively governed the British Empire in Asia. There was nothing special about the Benares itself. It was a trade ship among the many trade ships that sailed through these islands. What was special about the Benares was the where and the when. On April 5th, 1815, it was several days of good sailing from the island of Sumbawa. This island was far from the larger Indonesian islands like Java, far from the larger cities like Batavia, now known as Jakarta. But on the shore of Sumbawa was an extraordinary sight. A single peak rising up before the morning sun on the horizon. The highest peak in a long trail of island peaks. This was Tambora. It was stunning, a dictionary-perfect definition of a volcano. The Benares was headed in its direction. Tambora would be gone before it got there. Indonesia is a chain of islands, an archipelago. It was made by volcanoes, and it will be remade by volcanoes. Today, there are 76 active volcanoes and hundreds more that are inactive. We have records of well over 1,000 eruptions on the islands, and before records existed, there were many thousands more. This is because Indonesia sits at the intersection of massive tectonic plates, the Eurasian and the Australian. The Australian plate is moving faster, some 8 centimeters a year, triple the speed of its partner, and it slips under the edge of the Eurasian plate. Those few centimeters are the scene of tremendous, slow-moving violence. Sumbawa is tucked just off the edge of the Pacific Ocean, which is named for how it looks, Pacific or peaceful. It is not. Underneath the surface, far beneath, it is being ripped apart. The archipelago was a land of unbelievable natural beauty. Or at least it was unbelievable to the European colonists who'd arrived there a few centuries before. They were stunned by what they'd found. The land was saturated with life. Even the colors were more vivid than back home. The greens greener, the blues bluer. To the native inhabitants, this was all very believable. It was home. But the long-time residents of these islands were no longer alone. The islands, part of what was then known as the East Indies to Europeans, were scattered through the waters between Australia and Vietnam and the Philippines. Rich in spices and a perfect stopover on trade routes, the East Indies had long ago caught the eye of countries expanding their colonial holdings. The Dutch claimed the archipelago in the early 1600s, but the English had recently taken control, and they'd installed on the island of Java an official named Stamford Raffles. He would be the governor of the new colony. Raffles wanted to establish the islands as a cornerstone of the British Empire. They would supply Britain with coffee and sugar, he thought, and they would give the British Navy a perch from which to defend its colonies. Raffles was an industrious man. He learned the local languages. He surveyed the terrain. He collected the indigenous plants and animals. But each
Sample complete. Ready to continue?